Okay, in regards to intersectional invisibility theory, one of the things I
Hmm.
noticed just in conversations with people is that, or just in and out of academic spaces, is that the belief that a race first approach is male normative by default. Do you think that this may be an additional problem with the invisibility theory within intersectionality in regards to black males?
I mean, yes. It's the problem I have with this is that the historiography that intersectionality uses is so small, right? Because when you look at what black feminists are reacting to in their texts, like Jean Noble's and the souls of my black sisters are beautiful, or even the early work by Bell Hooks, Ain't I a Woman in 1982, is they're reacting to largely to the Black Panther Party. They're not really reacting to the civil rights movement at large. They're reacting to Black Power, where militant black men led the movement, and they're saying that the rhetoric used of race is reflective of black men's interests. But that's one snippet of time. So if you go back to the 19th century, which is an area that I study, and start talking about ethnology, then black men and black women were fundamentally invested in a race-first approach. Black women were suggesting that they needed manhood. When you look at the encyclopedic volumes of the history of suffrage that was edited by Elizabeth Cady Stanton, there's testimonies in there by black women saying that we would put aside our right to vote for the manhood of the race because that's what leads to racial advance. So I don't know what they mean when they say race positions are inherently male, because over the centuries, the race positions have changed based on how people have defined race. So in the 19th century, there were no genders, so everybody, men and women, were fighting for manhood. Anna Julian Cooper made the same argument. Ida B. Wells made the same argument. So everyone was invested in the racial manhood. The same thing happened during Jim Crow. The only time that you really get a problematization of this, given that before the 1960s and 70s, the idea of manhood, there was no even word for patriarchy. They kept talking about paternalism, right? So, and black men were considered to be victims of paternalism when you look at the work of, Alvin Murdoch, for example. So if you're going to talk about race consciousness being male, hence patriarchal, then it's from such a small snapshot of time that I think that one is woefully inadequate, and two, I don't know I don't know what's bad about that besides saying that it's male, right? Like it didn't exclude anyone. If you take that argument to be true, and Title VII was written with this idea intact, then the policies that black men fought for in the civil rights only overwhelmingly empirically benefited white women and black women more. So I just don't know the stake in saying that unless you adopt the feminist view, which says that there's something inherently wrong with masculinity. But then again, when you look at the stuff on masculinity, you find that there have historically been multiple masculinities, subordinate masculinities, subjugated masculinities, etc., that have been much more progressive than even feminist identities. And, this is one of the reasons I really like Connell's work, where she's talking about how there are different aspects of masculinity that are less invested in patriarchy than even emphasize femininity, which is largely Western liberal and capitalistic. So I just don't know what that word means unless somebody is making an actual argument saying that race consciousness and black masculinity lead to some consequence, which is largely going to just be a stereotype because empirically black men haven't benefited from anything in the rhetoric of manhood besides victimization. We have tropes that talk about racialized manhood in churches or in politics or like harkening back to black power. But there are no institutions in America that are specifically geared to the benefit of black men. So I just don't know what they're talking about.
I don't know if you've been following some of the debates about cultural appropriation.
Yes.
But one of the things I noticed, there was a issue. I think it was a rap group, the Migos, and they had Katy Perry performing with them, and then she's criticized as being a cultural appropriator, which I do agree with. But DeRay McKenson came, I guess he spoke with her, and he was very Okay, so he was very passive and very appeasing. and some of the commentaries I saw is that black men always cape historically for white women, are very historically submissive to them, which to me, just in my, quite frankly, I just thought it was simply just a readaptation of the black male rapist myth, and that white women are completely.
Absolutely.
That's how I saw it. I just want to know your thoughts on that.
Well, look, I don't. This is what I really don't understand. Okay, and I'm very serious here. So, how do black men who are thought to be sexist, misogynist, and rapists historically cape for white women when they're usually the group that black men are thought to be sexist, misogynist, and rapist against? Right? Like, when Catherine McKinnon makes her argument about black men in the workforce, she says black men try to do the same thing to white women that white men do. So her account, and this is endorsed by Kimberly Crenshaw because this is the definition of gender that Crenshaw utilizes in her understanding of intersectionality, was that black men have privilege precisely because when they move into law schools or law profession or the workforce, they can exercise sexism against white women and all women, really, black women and white women. So I don't know what that means if you then have a narrative that says black men historically cape for white women. Because I don't know of any historical text where the argument is black men have taken up for white women. These are stereotypes. These are stereotypes that are bred from internalized racism that says that black men prefer white women over black women, right? Just plain and simple. So when you have those kinds of stereotypes operating, then it makes sense to say something like historically black men cape for white women because it's just the stereotype that everybody accepts. There is no evidence that black men historically support organizations or endeavors by white women over black women. Just like when you read, the work on black men, like Essex's book, excluding the 5th chapter where he's talking about black power, evidently he doesn't like black power. He thought it was masculineness. But previous to his chapter on black power, he gives a long history of black men fighting for the rights of black women. The same thing with Danielle McGuire's piece before she came out against, Nate Parker, along with black feminists. She was saying that black men supported black women's organizations. I mean, when you look at Robert Staples' book and the work that black men did around the question of rape, or when you look at Francis Rogers Rowe's book on sociology, the work that black men like Nathan Hare, Robert Staples, et cetera, did around the investigation of black women. Joyce Latner's book, the work that black men did in SNCC to advance the cause of black women. I don't know what it means. Like, somebody has to give me some concrete historical examples. Otherwise, I think it's just the stereotype that's based in anti-black misandry, right? It's just what we say because you can say anything you want about black men and it becomes true. I remember one of the most ridiculous ones was on the movie Get Out. I think somebody posted a blog or a comment to Blativity or something where they said, black men are drawn into white women, so that's why that white woman was able to capture so many black men. But black women know better; they know to stay away from white people, and that's not true, right? When you look at interracial dating attitudes amongst black men and black women, they're pretty much equal. It's just that black women have much less success marrying outside of the group to white men. So it's like I'm constantly telling people, it's like, look, if you look at the Pew studies, if you look at the survey data, you see black men and black males and females largely believe the same thing, given their class and education levels. So if they say, oh, I'm more comfortable now dating white people or a white man or a white woman or, in a same-sex relationship with a white person, and that doesn't translate into marriage, that doesn't mean that black women are more loyal to the race. It just means they're less successful in getting or marrying out of their race than black men are. It doesn't mean that they're less inclined to date outside their race. And I think that these very simple concepts, these things that we could actually look up and prove, escape so many people because they're so invested in one side of the narrative that they can't take the time just to think beyond what's being said. And I think given that there's just a lot of work to be done in terms of how we explain black males that can't be taken up within the language of black feminism because it assumes so much pathology alongside black males. I mean, when you look at Bell Hooks' work, and you even look at this trope of black men being domestic abusers, I mean, this is the same argument that Elizabeth Cady Stanton and white feminists were making in 1867. Right? They were saying that black men shouldn't get the right to vote because if you give them that kind of political power, they're a tyrannical class that's going to abuse their women. So you're telling me, so the argument is that the white races in 1868 were right, and then in the 1970s and 1980s, 100 years later, that's what we see. We look at black men and we say that because they want power, they want to dominate, beat, and rape the women. I mean, come on, right? But this is the paradigm. This is the story of black men. And then when you go read the actual ethnographies of black males by white sociologists who are like interviewing people like, LeBeau, who's doing Tally's Corner, you see all kind of accounts of black women beating black men, which kind of speaks to the legitimacy of my work, where we talk about bidirectionality and mutual violence in our communities that are bred not just because, of domestic relationships and problems, but economic issues, self-esteem issues, issues of racism and systemic oppression. We have to do a much better job than simply quoting Crenshaw and Bell Hooks every time we have a problem about the empirical life and living of black males in the society. It's just time out for us using black feminist historiographies as the end-all, be-all of black males. There simply is no other group that is so pathologized in theory or in practice or in the real world as black males are. And I think black men have the right and have the duty to empirically investigate their own realities from their perspectives. So I think that when you have those kind of arguments about cultural appropriation and black men caping for white women, at some point somebody has to say, show me the receipts,